النفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه بلى قادرين على أن نسوي بنانه بل يريد الإنسان ليفجر أمامه يسأل أيان يوم القيامة فإذا برق البصر وخسف القمر وجمع الشمس والقمر يقول الإنسان يومئذ أين المفر كلا لا وزر إلى ربك يومئذ المستقر ينبأ الإنسان يومئذ بما قدم وأخر بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة ولو ألقى معاذيره لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه فإذا قرأناه فاتبع قرآنه ثم إن علينا بيانه كلا بل تحبون العاجلة وتذرون الآخرة وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة ووجوه يومئذ باثرة تظن أن يفعل بها فاقرة كلا إذا بلغت التراقي وقيل من راق وظن أنه الفراق والتفت الساق بالساق إلى ربك يومئذ المساق فلا صدق ولا صلى ولكن كذب وتولى ثم ذهب إلى أهله يتمطى أولى لك فأولى ثم أولى لك فأولى أيحسب الإنسان أن يترك سدى ألم يكن نطفة من مني يمنى ثم كان علقة وخلق فسوى فتجعل منه الزوجين الذكر والأنثى أليس ذلك بقادر على أن يحيي الموتى صدق الله العلي العظيم.
और मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद बुलंदतर नारे सलावत
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला
मोहम्मद और मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद बुलंदतर नारे सलावत
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद।
सलाम की चंद अशआर जो हैं वो पहले पेश खिदमत है। खानाए काबा सा कोई घर नजर आता नहीं, खानाए काबा सा कोई घर नजर आता
یقین کوئی بجز حیدر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ
کعبہ سکو
اے نبی دینے کو دے دیجے جسے چاہے علم ہے نبی دینے کو دے دیجے جسے چاہے علم ان میں کوئی فاتح خیبر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ
کعبہ سکو
اے بتو جھک جاؤ سجدے کو اسی میں خیر ہے بتو جھک جاؤ سجدے کو اسی میں خیر ہے کون ہے دوش پیمبر پر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ
کعبہ سکو
ہے جوان بیٹے کا غم بے نور آنکھیں ہو گئی ہے جوان بیٹے کا غم بے نور آنکھیں ہو گئی شاہدی کو لاشِ اکبر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ کعبہ
سکو
گود خالی دیکھ کر مادر کی صغرا نے کہا گود خالی دیکھ کر مادر کی صغرا نے کہا کیا ہوا اماں میرا اصغر نظر آتا نہیں کیا ہوا اماں میرا اصغر نظر آتا نہیں خانہ کعبہ سا کوئی پر محمد والے محمد بلند تر نعرہ صلوات اللہم
صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد
فاتحہ قتل کاظم کا دیا حکم جو عباسی نے قتل کاظم کا دیا حکم جو عباسی نے سر کھلے روضہ اقدس سے پیمبر نکلے مرتضیٰ آئے تڑپ کر نجف اشرف سے بال بکھرائے خلیفہ کے محل میں پہنچے بال بکھرائے خلیفہ کے
محل میں پہنچے
خواب میں اس نے شہ عقدہ کشا کو دیکھا اور روتے ہوئے محبوب خدا کو دیکھا نیم خوابی میں محمد کی سنی یہ فریاد کیا یہی میری رسالت کا صلہ ہے جلا ہو چکا ظلم سے امت کے میرا گھر برباد کب تک آخر یہ ستم جھیلے گی میری اولاد کب تک آخر یہ ستم جھیلے گی میری اولاد راحتیں سارے زمانے کی زمانے کے لیے رہ گئی آل میری ٹھوکریں کھانے کے لیے تنگ و تاریک وہ حجرہ وہ محمد کا قمر روشنی کا نہ جہاں دخل ہوا کا نہ گزر کبھی ہوتی تھی نہ شام اور نہ آتی تھی سحر کلفت شام کے زندان جفا سے بڑھ کر کلفت شام کے زندان جفا سے بڑھ کر وہاں سے تم چند گرفتاروں پہ بٹ جاتے تھے یہاں سب ایک ہی قیدی پہ ستم ڈھاتے تھے بے کسی ان کی رقم کرتے ہیں یوں ابن حجر زہر بیداد سے مارا گیا جانے شب 3 دن فرش پہ تڑپا یہ محمد کا جگر بیڑیاں پہنے ہوئے قید سے نکلا مر کر بیڑیاں پہنے ہوئے قید سے نکلا مر کر کلمہ گو بیٹھے رہے دفن کو ہم لائے پل بغداد پہ لاشے کو یوں ہی ڈال آئے اور بھی حکم ستمگار سے ڈھایا یہ غزا ایک تختے پہ رکھا لاشائے سلطان عرب کھینچتے پھرتے رہے کوچا بکوچا اسے جا فاطمہ رو کے پکاری یہ بسد رنجوتا فاطمہ رو کے پکاری یہ بسد رنجوتا ہائے تاریک ہے اب سارا جہاں نظروں میں پھر گیا لاشہ مسلم کا سما نظروں میں قتل قاسم کا دیا حکم جو عباسی نے
محمد والے محمد بلندر صلوات
اللہم صلی علی محمد و علی محمد
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Brothers and sisters, we have gathered here to commemorate the Shahadat of Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam and Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad and wafat of Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. We pay our condolences to the Imam of our time, Imam Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. Allahumma salli ala. We also pay our thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah has given us this tawfiq and opportunity to come here. We ask Allah to increase in our tawfiqat and more importantly, hasten the reappearance of Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. As planned today, we had invited our respected scholar Sayyid Kazim Alami, but unfortunately due to a personal emergency, he is unable to come. So inshallah, we will continue our majlis with a recorded video, but we also request you to please pray Suratul Hamd for Sayyid Kazim Alami and also all other brothers. May Allah solve the problems of all our mu'mineen. Please recite Suratul Hamd. Inshallah, we will start our majlis, and in the meanwhile, I also request to please recite Suratul Fatiha for all the marhumeen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
A second salawat for the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Imam of our time, a third salawat in the loudest of your voices. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليه وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة. يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I begin by extending my condolences to the Imam of our time, al-Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, on the occasion of the Shahadah of al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. One of the honorific titles of our seventh Imam is that he is known as Babul Hawa'ij. Babul Hawa'ij meaning the gateway, the door of our needs, of our requests. You see, brothers and sisters, when we turn to Allah Azza wa Jal and we seek our hajat through the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, this is the essence of Tawheed. There are other schools that perceive tawassul as shirk, that you are ascribing a partner to Allah. But in reality, tawassul is not us making the Imam Allah's partner. Rather, we are making the Imam our partner in dua. There's a difference between making a human being Allah's partner. We are making the Imams our partner in our appeal to Allah. And this is a sign of humility. That we find that we are unworthy of making a request on our own. That we partner up with those who are most beloved to Allah. So the Imam is Babul Hawa'ij, the gateway for our requests to be granted. You know, brothers and sisters, when you think about the 14 Ma'soomeen, we revere and we honor all of them. But I'm pretty sure that each and every one of us has a special connection with one of the Ma'soomeen. For some, it might be Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. For others, it might be Imam al-Askari, Imam al-Sajjad. We revere all of them. We consider all of them our spiritual guides. But you might have a closer connection with a specific Imam. And for me personally, it always has been al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. And the reason why I have always felt a close connection to Imam al-Kadhim, it's because when I was younger, I discovered that I would not have been born if it wasn't for the shafa'ah and the tawassul of Imam al-Kadhim. I'll share with you a story about something that happened to my maternal grandfather. My grandfather was born in 1933. He was born in Baghdad. And he lived a few miles away from the shrine of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. He was the youngest in the family, and his name was Kazim. He was named after the seventh Imam. When he was in elementary school, he became very ill. His mother, my great-grandparents, his parents thought that it was just a flu or a common cold, so they didn't think much of it. They gave him some medicine. One day went by, 2 days went by, and he wasn't getting better. His health was not improving. He missed an entire week of school. They took him to a local clinic. The doctor wasn't able to diagnose him. They went to one hospital after another. His health wasn't improving. Months went by. And he became so sick that he couldn't even get out of bed. He was losing weight, vomiting, feverish, until one night they rushed him to the hospital, and the doctors said that we don't know what's wrong with your son, but what we do know is that it doesn't look like he's going to survive. Whatever this is, his time is limited. Now you can imagine that when you're a mother and this is your youngest child, that's the last thing that you want to hear from a doctor, that we don't have a solution. We don't know what the child is suffering from. So my grandfather's mother, so my great-grandmother, she loses all hope. She is literally told that your youngest son is going to die at the age of 8 of an illness that we don't even know. So what does she do? She leaves her house barefoot, in a state of absolute desperation. And she walks barefoot to the shrine of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. She goes to the shrine of the Imam. She reaches the Dharih, and then she starts to cry. She says to the Imam that, Ya ibn Rasulullah, my son is going to die. I've taken him to every doctor that I know, every hospital, every clinic. So I ask you, Ya ibn Rasulullah, to give shifa to my son. I named him after you, and you are Babul Hawa'ij, and I have come to you barefoot, begging you to do tawassul with Allah Azza wa Jal and give my son healing. So she returns home. That night, she has a dream. And I heard this story growing up from many members of my family. That night she has a dream. In the dream she's sitting at home and someone knocks on the door. She goes to the door, she opens it. She says, I saw a man wearing a black turban. She said there was so much light in his face that I was going to address him as Ya ibn Rasulullah, but before I could speak, the Sayyid said to me that al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far has sent me to you. She says, my son is ill. I was told that he's going to die. In the dream, this Sayyid who was sent by Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, he says to her that al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far says to you, take your son to St. Mary Hospital. There is a doctor who is there who can cure him. She wakes up from this dream, and she's never heard of a hospital called St. Mary Hospital in Baghdad. So she wakes up and she asks around, have you guys heard of a hospital named St. Mary Hospital? She asks neighbors, friends. No one has heard of this hospital. Until she discovers that this is a small little private hospital in the outskirts of Baghdad. So she discovers that this is an actual hospital. She takes my grandfather to the hospital, and on that day, it's happened that there was a German physician visiting that clinic. The moment that physician saw my grandfather, he said, I think I know what it is. And they discovered that there was fluid buildup in his spine, and they removed the fluid, and he survived. So all my life, I grew up hearing that your mother, all of you were born because of the tawassul of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim salawatullahi alayhi. What makes Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam so unique? Why is this man so beloved to Allah Azza wa Jal, that people come to him from all around the world? And people have many stories. My grandfather wasn't the only one to receive shifa from Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. There are many, hundreds and thousands of stories similar to this. Why is this Imam so beloved? Why is he so dear to Allah Azza wa Jal? You know, brothers and sisters, when you look at the life of this Imam, the Imam alayhi salam exhibited patience like you and I cannot even comprehend. You know, we always say that there is no day like the day of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. But I would say that there are no years like the years of Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. That no Imam suffered more in one day than Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. But perhaps no Imam suffered year after year more than Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam. If Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam is the symbol of patience among the prophets of God, Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam is the symbol of patience among the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. When Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was martyred, you know, brothers and sisters, Imam al-Sadiq was martyred by al-Mansur al-Diwaniqi. He was a ruthless Abbasid Khalifa. And when he saw that Imam al-Sadiq's popularity was spreading and he was having so much influence, he issued an order for Imam al-Sadiq to be killed as well as his successor. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam knew that the seventh Imam would be in danger. So in his wasiyah, the Imam alayhi salam writes that his wasi is actually 5 people, to confuse the Abbasids so they would not know who is the actual successor. In his wasiyah he writes that my wasi is 5, there are 5 people. One of them was Mansur, he wrote. He wrote Hamida, his wife. He wrote Abdullah, one of his sons. He writes the name of Musa al-Kadhim among them. So the Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam knew that the freedom that he enjoyed during his life, the ability that he had to teach people from the minbar of the Prophet, that luxury would not be afforded to his son, to the 7th Imam. And therefore you find that immediately after the martyrdom of Imam al-Sadiq, it wasn't clear to the Shias who the 7th Imam was. You know, brothers and sisters, we take it for granted that we can easily list the 12 Imams. To us, 14 centuries later, it's clear who the 12 Imams are. But when Imam al-Sadiq is martyred in Medina, Imam al-Sadiq didn't announce publicly who the 7th Imam was. Because if he did, he would be putting a bullseye on the 7th Imam and he would have been immediately killed by the Khulafa. So the Imam alayhi salam only disclosed this information to special people. So many of the close companions of Imam al-Sadiq were confused. They didn't know who is the 7th Imam. They knew that there are 12 Imams. But after the death of Imam al-Sadiq, they don't know who the 7th is. So in this environment, in this climate of confusion, one of the sons of Imam al-Sadiq claims the imamah for himself. Abdullah al-Aftah. You know, brothers and sisters, sometimes we have this impression that the families of prophets and imams are utopian families, that they don't have any problems. When you look at prophets, you take the first family on earth, Adam alayhi salam. Some parents, they're embarrassed that, my daughter doesn't wear hijab, my sister, my son, sometimes he goes to the club. Now, I'm not saying that that's okay, but what I'm saying is that even prophets had problems with their children. Can you imagine if we have a community member, he comes to the center, and he's like, yeah, so my sons got into a fight yesterday, and one of them killed the other, right? Because if you look at the sons of Adam, Qabil kills Habil. You think you have, troubled kids? Adam alayhi salam's sons were killing each other. If you look at Yaqub didn't have a utopian family. His sons tried to kill Yusuf. Some of the children of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt claimed, forget about just not being religious and sometimes missing Salatul Fajr. Some of them claimed to be the representatives of God. They falsely claimed to be the representatives of God on earth. That's not a reflection of the Imams. Just because you have family members or children who are not religious, that doesn't mean that you're not good parents. People have free wills. It's possible that you do your best and your kids or your siblings or your relatives still end up corrupt. So Abdullah al-Aftah claims to be the Imam. Now, Imam al-Sadiq had many students. You have, for example, Hisham ibn Salim and other prominent companions who studied with Imam al-Sadiq, and they know the knowledge that an Imam is supposed to have. Mu'min al-Taq, for example. So Abdullah al-Aftah is claiming to be the seventh Imam. Now, alhamdulillah, the Shi'as, they're not naive. These are students of Imam al-Sadiq. These are fuqaha, they're ulama. So they say, okay, we'll test you. Claim to be the Imam. So they asked him some fiqhi questions, some specific jurisprudential questions, and he wasn't able to answer. So they quickly, and subhanallah, the Abbasids didn't interfere with Abdullah al-Aftah. In fact, they had no problem with him promoting himself. So the seniors among the Shia, the ulama, they quickly ruled out Abdullah al-Aftah as an imam. He doesn't even know some of the basic ahkam. So what happens? So they walk out of the house. So they gather in one of the houses in Medina. They test Abdullah al-Aftah. He fails their test. And they walk out of the house crying, because no one knows who the imam is. So they speak amongst each other that, what should we do? We don't know who the seventh Imam is. You know why they cry? Because they know what it feels like to have an Imam. And when they're living in a period where they don't have access to their ma'soom, it pains them. You and I were living during al-Ghaybatul Kubra and we're laughing. It's as if there's no problem. We are experiencing the greatest musibah, which is the complete absence of our Imam, that we don't have any access to our Imam. So Hisham ibn Salim, and this narration is mentioned in Al-Kafi, he says, we walked out of the house after testing Abdullah al-Aftah, and we were confused. We were crying. We were thinking to ourselves that should we become Zaydis, Murjias? Should we follow other sects? Hisham ibn Salim, who's one of the students of Imam al-Sadiq, he says, as we were discussing amongst ourselves in the alleyways, an old man pointed at me and told me to come to him. Hisham ibn Salim, he says that I thought that this man was one of the agents of Bani Abbas, because they the Abbasids, they kept a close eye on the Shias. So he said to himself that they're going to take me and they're going to execute me. So he farewells all of his companions and he says that I'd rather be killed rather than seeing you all martyred. So he follows this old man, thinking that he's being taken to his death. The old man leads him to the house of Imam Musa al-Kadhim. Now I want you to pay attention to the level of taqiyya at this time. That we think that we're suffering today. We have the freedom of coming together and freely mentioning the names of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, teaching their ahadith. Hisham ibn Salim is secretly led to the house of Imam al-Kadhim. He enters into the house and Imam al-Kadhim is sitting there. And he says, don't follow this madhab or that madhab, come to me. Hisham ibn Salim, he says, I was still unsure who the Imam was. Because Abdullah is the son of Imam al-Sadiq and Musa ibn Ja'far is also a son of the Imam. What if he's just like his brother and he's falsely claiming? So he says, I asked Musa ibn Ja'far, are you the Imam? Imam Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam, he says, I didn't say that. Pay attention. The Imam is in the privacy of his own home. Hisham ibn Salim is asking him, are you the Imam? The Imam does not feel comfortable in telling him that yes, I'm the Imam. That's how much they were being watched. So Hisham ibn Salim, he says, I thought to myself that maybe I should rephrase the question. So he says, I asked Musa ibn Ja'far, do you have an Imam? And Musa ibn Ja'far says, no. Hisham ibn Salim says, I understood that he was the Imam, and when the Imam said to me, I don't have an Imam, my heart was overcome by the presence of the Ma'soom of my time. Hisham ibn Salim, he says to the Imam that, should I inform the Shia of this? Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam says to him, only inform those who can handle the sensitivity of this information. That was what life was like during the time of Imam al-Kadhim. People literally had to risk their lives just to discover who the seventh Imam was, just to know his identity. How shameful is it today that we live in a time where you can come to a masjid. Not only do you know the identity of the seventh Imam, you can listen to his words, you can learn about his life, and no one shows up. How are we going to face the Prophet on the Day of Judgment? How are we going to face the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? So this is number one, the climate of taqiyya, that there was so much fear. Now why was the Imam so cautious about even revealing his identity? We'll speak about this shortly. Now, one of the most wicked Abbasid Khalifas was al-Mansur. Al-Mansur is the Abbasid Khalifa. He was the second Abbasid Khalifa. He poisons Imam al-Sadiq. And he ruled with an iron fist. He instilled fear in people. Anyone who opposed him would be executed, thrown in the dungeons. Now, in order for you to maintain power, you can't rule with an iron fist. You have to, at least to some degree, gain popular support. So the khulafa that came after Mansur, they realized that, listen, if we're going to hold on to power, we need some support from the people. So what did they do? They decided to restore some of the land that was confiscated from the people. So for example, the Khalifa would declare that any land or any homes that were wrongfully seized, we are returning these properties to their rightful owners. So through this new policy, they gained some support from the masses, because now they're trying to instill this system of adala, that we're trying to, restore justice. Harun al-Rashid, when he came to power, he thought to himself that I have to be very careful about how I deal with Musa al-Kadhim. And he thought to himself that perhaps one way to slow down Imam al-Kadhim's opposition to us, we have this impression, brothers and sisters, that the Imams, they were just in the masjid and they were madloom and they were just reading dua, and that's all that they were doing. If Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam was just doing sujood and he was just hanging around at the mosques, believe me, Harun al-Rashid would have no problem with him. The Imam alayhi salam was leading an underground movement to overthrow the Abbasids. That's why they feared him. So Harun al-Rashid, he thinks to himself that maybe if I give Fadak back to Imam al-Kadhim, perhaps that would slow his opposition to us. Maybe I just need to give him a piece of the pie, so he'll be satisfied, and he got his little sliver of dunya, and he'll leave us alone. So he summons Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. He says to him, Ya Aba al-Hasan, khudh fadaka, that I heard that the Umayyads, the early Khulafa, they confiscated Fadak from your grandmother Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha. So take it back, and then we'll be on good terms. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, La akhudhuha illa bihududiha. I'm paraphrasing. It's as though the Imam says that, I don't think you'll give it back. Harun al-Rashid says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, we've been passing out land to people all year round. It's just a piece of land. We'll give it back to you. It's not a big deal. The Imam says, I'll only take it if you give me the full boundaries of Fadak. Fadak is an orchard, so Harun al-Rashid says, yeah, tell me exactly what part of Medina it is, and I'll restore it to you. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, the eastern boundary is Central Asia. The western boundary is North Africa. The northern boundary is the northern edge of the Islamic Empire. The south is the southern tip of the Islamic Empire. That's Fadak. Meaning what? Fadak is the khilafah that you stole from Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayhi. Harun al-Rashid, he says that if we give this to you, then there's nothing left for us. The Imam says that's what Fadak is. You see, brothers and sisters, the Imams alayhimus salam, they were powerful because they spoke truth to power. They were not intimidated by tyrants. The Imam alayhis salam was very vocal when he was in the presence of Harun al-Rashid. When Imam al-Kadhim alayhis salam was in Medina, sometimes the Abbasids would send people just to keep tabs on the Imam, just to monitor exactly where he is and report back. Sometimes the agents of the Abbasids, they would not be able to locate Imam al-Kadhim in Medina. So they start to panic. Where is the Imam? What is he doing? There are reports that he was spotted in Sham Imagine the Imam is moving throughout the Islamic empire silently. He's in Sham. What is he doing in Sham? He's recruiting people for his movement. He's bringing people to the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And when he's in Sham, he tells people that if any of the Abbasid spies, if they ask you, if you have seen me, deny that you even know who I am. That's how dangerous it was to be affiliated with Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. And there were many people who were killed because of their connection to the Imam alayhi salam. The Imam, he also established a system of wikala. You know, brothers and sisters, after the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, do you know how many Shi'as were left? I'm talking about real Shi'as. Not just lovers of Ahlul Bayt. Real followers of Ahlul Bayt. We have a hadith to say there was 3. There were 3 genuine, staunch Shi'as after the Shahadat of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Of course, other than his direct family. Imam Zainul Abidin had to rebuild the Ummah. Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq. At the time of Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Kadhim, the followers of Ahlul Bayt had multiplied to such an extent that the Imams had to appoint representatives in every corner of the Islamic empire. You see how quickly the Imams alayhimus salam were able to rebuild the community? They were effective at what they did. Imam al-Kadhim, Imam Zainul Abidin used to purchase slaves, train them for a year, and release them. And he would do that year after year after year. Now what were these wakala doing? Many of them were secretly spreading the teachings of Ahlul Bayt throughout the Islamic empire. People would come to Imam al-Kadhim, Imam al-Ridha, and they would say to the Imams that we have questions to ask you, but we live far away from you. And it's too difficult for us to travel to Medina. So what should we do? Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, for example, says that seek the knowledge of your religion from Zakaria ibn Adam. So some of these wakala were scholars. People would refer to them for religious matters. But in addition to that, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they would give their zakat and khums to these wakala, and through these networks, they would deliver it to the Imam. So the Imam was receiving all of these funds, and he was funding his oppositional movement against the Khalifa. That's why Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam was imprisoned. He wasn't imprisoned because of salah or because he was reading Quran. He was imprisoned because he was actively fighting against that tyrannical regime. So the Imam alayhi salam is receiving these large amounts of money. He's taking care of orphans. He's supporting these different teachers. He's building this underground movement. And then what happens? One of the Imam's relatives, subhanAllah, sometimes your worst enemies are those who are actually closest to you. One of the relatives of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, he goes where? He goes to Harun al-Rashid. He goes to Harun, and Harun was unaware of this network of wakala. Harun didn't know. He thought that Imam al-Kadhim just believed that he was the Imam. He didn't know that money is flowing to the Imam from every corner of the Islamic empire. So this man, this relative of Imam al-Kadhim, he says to Harun that it seems that there are 2 Khalifas. Harun al-Rashid says, what do you mean there are 2 Khalifas? He says that you receive tax revenue, and there's a man in Medina who's also receiving khiraj. He's also receiving the tax revenue. That's when Harun al-Rashid knew that he had to eliminate Imam Musa al-Kadhim. You know, brothers and sisters, when we listen to these stories, we listen to how Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam imprisoned, how Harun al-Rashid imprisoned Imam al-Kadhim, and we say, La'natullahi alayhi, may Allah punish him. But believe me, some of us would sell out the Ahlul Bayt for much less than the kingdom of Harun. Because Harun al-Rashid, you know, if he was alive today, you would think that he's Shia, because of how much he expressed his verbal love for the Ahlul Bayt. If Harun al-Rashid were to walk into our center and someone was reciting poetry about Imam al-Kadhim, he would probably raise his voice and recite the loudest salawat. He doesn't have a problem praising. But the moment Musa al-Kadhim comes between me and dunya, that's when I have to eliminate Musa al-Kadhim. We all yearn for the dhuhur of the 12th Imam, right? Let me give you a very possible scenario when the Imam reappears. Many of you guys are young. Those who are a bit older, you've been saving up a lot of money. You've been working all your lives, contributing to your 401k, saving for retirement. You have an impressive portfolio. You have stocks. You know, you're trying to secure your financial future, right? Picture this, and believe me, this is very plausible. It's very possible. Say the Imam reappears in the next month, and the country that you're living in says that anyone who supports this Imam, this Mahdi, is going to be considered a terrorist. And if you express any inclination towards him or his movement, we're going to freeze your bank accounts. We're going to freeze your assets. And you're going to be arrested by the cops or the FBI or the CIA. How many of you guys are going to really voice your support for the Imam? It's the same thing. You know, the Abbasids have their agents, and today there are agents today. It's easy to point the finger at Harun al-Rashid and Mansour, but we haven't been tested, brothers and sisters. You know, Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, in his last days, he was speaking to Hawza students, and he said to them that we curse Harun al-Rashid day and night. But has the dunya of Harun al-Rashid ever been offered to you? Some of us, we sell our religion for much less. We compromise our religious values because we don't want to feel awkward. You know, sometimes we'll sit at a table where alcohol is being served. You sold your deen. Why? Because I don't want to, be the oddball. You sold your deen just because you didn't want to be the oddball. You sold it for such a cheap price. Has the dunya of Harun al-Rashid been offered to you? You know, brothers and sisters, Bahlul, who was a student of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, who used to pretend to be insane, and through his insanity he used to convey profound wisdom, he enters the court of Harun al-Rashid, and Harun is speaking about his kingdom, and he would look up at the clouds and he would say, Sharriqi aw gharribi, O clouds, go to the east or west, wherever you reign, you will reign in my kingdom. Bahlul, he asks Harun that, O Harun, what would you give for a cup of water if you were dying of thirst? Imagine there was no water, and you're about to die of dehydration. how much would you be willing to give for a cup of water? Harun says, I'll give half of my kingdom. If that's what it takes to survive, I'm going to give half of my kingdom. Bahlul says, okay, let's say that you drink the water and then you lose your ability to expel it from your body. What would you be willing to give to expel the water from your body? He says, I'd give the other half. Bahlul says, Harun, this kingdom that is worth a cup of water and the ability to urinate, do not allow this kingdom to make you arrogant. That's the value of it. Believe me, even if Allah were to give you millions and millions of dollars, if you have cancer, you will give every penny just to survive. But we sell it. We sell it. We sell our akhirah for these crumbs of dunya. Harun al-Rashid, he comes to Medina shortly after he becomes the Khalifa, and when he comes to power, he wants to give this impression that I'm a lover of Ahlul Bayt, because he wants to gain the support of the masses. So he arrives in Medina, and people come to visit the Khalifa. And Harun al-Rashid, he starts to give out gifts to people. He's essentially bribing them for their support. People would come, they would kiss his hand, and then Harun summons Imam al-Kadhim. Ma'mun was there with his father. He says that I saw an older man enter into the presence of my father, and my father treated him differently. He stood up. Everyone else would stand up out of respect for my father. When Musa ibn Ja'far entered into the presence of the Khalifa, Harun stood up for him. And he honored him, and he had him sit next to him, and he started to chat with Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. Harun was giving large sums of money to all of these people that visited him. So he starts to chat with Imam al-Kadhim, and he says, how are you? How's life? How's business? The Imam alayhi salam says, it's difficult, I'm going through some hardships. Ma'mun says that I thought that my father was going to give the largest amount of money to Musa al-Kadhim, because he showed him the most respect. And he gave large sums of money to random people, so I assumed that this man, who he's showing so much reverence to, he would give him the most. But he gave the Imam alayhi salam a small amount of money. So he says, I asked my father why he did that. Why did you give large amounts of money to others, but you were very stingy with Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam? And the Imam alayhi salam, he did this intentionally to prove a point. Harun says to his son that I'm very cautious with Musa ibn Ja'far, because every gold coin that I give to him will become a sword that will fight me from Khurasan. Meaning that don't think that this man is just a worshipper. This man is leading a powerful opposition to overthrow me. That's why the Imams were madloom. They were not madloom, they were not oppressed because of their passiveness. They were not oppressed because they were pacifists. They were oppressed because they were the only ones who were fiercely opposing the tyrants of their time. And that's how they trained their followers. One of the students of Imam al-Kadhim, one of his companions, was a man by the name of Safwan al-Jammal. From his last name, you know what his occupation is. Jammal, he's the one that rents out camels. So Someone that rents out camels, the equivalent of that today would be someone who rents out cars, right? You know, like enterprise. So Safwan al-Jamma, that was his business. And he used to rent out his camels to Harun when Harun would want to go perform Hajj. Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, he says to Safwan, he says to him, كُلُّ شَيْءٍ مِّنْكَ حَسَنٌ جَمِيلٌ, that everything about you is good. Imam al-Kadhim says, I like everything about you except for one thing. There's one thing that you do that is despicable. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, what is it that I do? He says, you rent out your camels to this zalim. Safwan tries to justify his actions. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I rent it out to him so he can perform Hajj, so he can go to Baytullah, not to go to the nightclubs. I rent him out so he can perform ibadah. Look at how intelligent our imams are. This is real social justice. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, when does he pay you? So he rents out these camels. When does he pay you? Safwan says, he pays me when he returns. He doesn't pay me up front. He rents them, and then when he returns them, I get payment. The Imam alayhi salam, he asks him, do you want him to stay alive long enough to pay you back? So when you rent out these camels, do you want him to remain alive long enough so he can pay you? Safwan says, yes, I want to be compensated. The Imam says, مَنْ أَرَادَ بَقَاءَهُمْ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. The one who wants them to remain alive is one of them. Allah will hold you responsible for this niyyah, that you want a zalim like him to stay alive. This is why Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam was thrown in the dungeons of Baghdad. And even when he was taken to prison, you know, when you experience hardship in life, we always focus on the hardship. We think that life is a series of ups and downs, times of hardship and times of ease. But life is actually much more like a railroad track, because Allah says, "Inna ma'al usri yusra," that with every hardship there is ease alongside it. When Imam al-Kadhim is being dragged into the prisons, do you know what he says? He focuses on the yusr, not the usr. If you and I were being dragged to the prisons, what would we say? I'm going to be separated from my... We'd be focused only on what? The bad, the hardship. What does the Imam say? He says, Allahumma inni talama kuntu as'aluka an tufarrighani li'ibadatik wa qad istajabtu li wa laka alhamdu ala dhalik. He says, oh Allah, for a long time I've been asking you to give me free time to worship you. And now you have granted my dua, and now I have nothing but time to worship you. The Imam alayhi salam, even at the most difficult moment in his life, he was able to see the ease. He was able to see the positive side of the hardship. He's poisoned in the prison. Harun al-Rashid himself, he puts poison inside of the dates. People write letters to the Imam alayhi salam saying, Ibn Rasulullah, we've been separated from you for a long time. This is the longest we've been cut away from an infallible. When will we see you again? The Imam alayhi salam says, very soon we shall be reunited. They say, where, O Imam, where will we see you again? He says that very soon, on this day, on such and such day, you will see me on the bridge in Baghdad. So all of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, news spreads that Musa ibn Ja'far is going to be released from the prison. We are going to be reunited with our Imam. They all stand there. They're excited. They're yearning to see the Imam. The gate opens from the prison. Instead of seeing their Imam walk out, they see the janazah of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, he was there, but I say to Imam al-Ridha who was there and he shrouded his father, they kept his body on the bridge of Baghdad for 3 days. I say to Imam al-Ridha, Ibn Rasulullah, I know it was difficult for you to see your father as flesh and bones on that day. He was starved to death. He was poisoned. He was on the bridge for 3 days. But what would you have said, Ibn Rasulullah, about your grandfather, Imam al-Hussein, who was left in Karbala without a shroud? Ibn Rasulullah, what would you have done if you were to see your grandfather, Imam al-Hussein, trampled by the hooves of the horses? Ibn Rasulullah, what would you have done? Your father, Imam al-Kadhim, yes, he was martyred, but at least his head was not separated from his body. Ibn Rasulullah, at least your father, Imam al-Kadhim, at least his head was not put on the spear and paraded through the markets. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us and guide us and illuminate our hearts with the teachings of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the ziyarah of Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal for the sake of Bab al-Hawa'ij to grant us our hajat. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give shifa, to give healing to all those who are sick. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to resolve all of our problems, to bless our families, to increase our sustenance, our material sustenance, our spiritual sustenance. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal for the sake of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam to keep us on the straight path, the path of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And most importantly, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the intercession, the shafa'ah of our beloved Imam on the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
गरीबुल वतन कैद में मर गया एक गरीब पुल पे बगदाद के पुल पे बगदाद के है जनाजा रखा एक गरीब ایک غریب خون آنکھوں سے اپنی بہاتے ہوئے ہتھکڑی بیڑیاں طوق پہنے ہوئے قید سجاد کی یاد کرتا ہوا ایک غریب الوطن ایک غریب جس کے 18 بیٹے جوان سال تھے اس کی میت کو مزدور لے کر چلے بین کرتی چلی ساتھ میں سیدہ ایک غریب الوطن ایک غریب اجنبی شہر ہے اور دور اہل وطن تیرے بابا کو دے کون غسل و کفن آؤ جلدی وطن آؤ سے امام رضا ایک غریب الوطن ایک غریب الوطن صبر کرنا ہے صغرا کے جیسا تجھے راستہ دیکھنا باپ کا چھوڑ دے جا کے معصوم قم سے کہہ دے ہوا ایک غریب الوطن قید میں چل بسا شاہ کون و مکان اب تو مظلوم کی کھول دو بیڑیاں تم نے چاہا تھا جو لو وہی ہو گیا ایک غریب الوطن ایک غریب لاش پر بھی نہیں رونے والا کوئی وارث دین کی ہائے بے وارثی ڈھونڈتی ہے قضا دفن کرنے کی جا ایک غریب الوطن قید میں مر گیا ایک غریب الوطن قید میں مر گیا. السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ.
السلام عليك يا علي أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر العلم النبيين. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم. السلام عليك علي بن موسى أيها الرضا. السلام عليك محمد بن علي التقي الجواد. السلام عليك علي بن محمد الهادي النقي. السلام عليك حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك حجة الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان سيدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وزهوره وجعلنا من أنصار وأعوان والتائبين تحت لوائك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه آبائي في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.